Okay, that will come. So when you go to the mic, it's also an occasion to get to know each other. We'll be spending 3 days together. So before you ask your question or share your observation, you can introduce yourself so that we get to know each other. So as you are maybe thinking of the question or observation you would like to share with the group, I'll turn to the panelists. Maybe the question I would like to ask you, and I will take a very short answer from each of you. What is it you think that Mobilize Your City brings to the members? So what is the area where you think Mobilize Your City brings the most value to our members? And Sasang, you're designated to go first.
That's a great question. I think immediately one of the anecdotes that comes to my mind is in Antananarivo, in a city in Africa. We provide these trainings and we ask for feedback. And one of the participants said that in their discussions with the World Bank, because of the trainings that we had on active modes, he was better able to think about how the World Bank would support active modes in their cities. And there's a lot of stories like that I think we can talk about from the macro level of understanding sustainable mobility to, concretely the projects. But I think from a secretariat perspective, it's really nice when you're doing these online trainings and webinars to know that it's actually really helping people do their work in a very specific way.
Thank you, Sasan.
First, the process per se, going through the strategic planning process and capacity building is very useful to have a comprehensive vision of the stakes of improving and going through sustainable mobility. And maybe secondly, the quality seal, as was mentioned by Matthias. I think the fact that it's a standardized quality approach with a clear SDG, DNA, and clear targets and a monitoring system, it really helps to potentially leverage finance.
I guess, Bertrand, I would say it opens a door that a lot of cities didn't even know was there. I look at the 2 cities we're working in Pakistan, Bangor and Abbottabad. I doubt without MYC, any of this would ever be on their mind, that they would go in this route. And yet, here we are, they're now suddenly plugged into this network here. They're developing, not just a sump, but, taking the investment further. And without MYC, none of this would exist.
From my side, I see that MYC has a very unique, it provides a very unique advantage. You can tell stories. You have different cities have different storylines. And when you start looking at the MYC's knowledge products which come out, you see different stories from different countries. I think at this forum is one of the benefits of MYC, because you can see best practices, you can see exchange of insights of what is happening in different cities. I think from a data perspective, I believe that it provides a very unique advantage of opening up the transport data in different cities.
Obviously agreeing to all my pre-speakers, and I think this personal contacts between cities and also country officials in charge of urban transport, of moving urban transport forward is one of key issues. And so for example, in Latin America, there's the Euroclimate Plus initiative funded by the European Union. So now we have ADB engaging in the Asian region. And so I think these organizations are really key in like providing formats and exchange formats, training formats on this regional scale, where then like kind of this personal context between cities can be built up. So you're gonna know, okay, I just can call, I have this issue when I'm developing an SUMP, I can just call our colleagues in another city and ask them how they did this special part, this step of the SUMP, how they did engage their citizens, what they could recommend. I think this is one of the really values added of the MYC partnership.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you. I'm looking at the audience again, and yes, please. Deliani, nice to meet you. Please introduce yourself and
Okay.
ask your question and share your observation.
Okay, so hi, I'm Deliani from ITGP Indonesia. I would like to ask, maybe because of actually personally interested with the presentation and what the MYC already done. And it's really interested because of number of cities in Indonesia that we work with haven't been registered into be partnered with the MYC. And we are somehow also wondering about how then the cities can also be partnered, because I think it's very interesting because of like last time the North Sumatra, Medan, already joined and registered, already completed the SUMPs. But then how about the other cities? Is there any kind of like history back about the difficulties happened to connect with the Indonesian cities? Or is there any kind of like gap that we should also to fulfill so we can connect these cities? Because of we see that it's not only about planning, but how then the MYC can also assist into the implementation, because it's really kind of like we have number of the documents of study or even like pre-feasibility studies, but then it haven't like to go for the next step. So we are looking into that kind of like steps, and number of cities actually now have already implement or even like do piloting for the BRT, but they do not know how to then to continue this kind of like BRT. So we also want to connect with the National Planning Agency, and that they give reference us to just like us. Is there any kind of like any other kind of like options? Should we nudge the national government first to register or be partner with the MYC, or we can like directly do with the cities to go partner with the MYC? So yeah.
That's a great and fundamental question. Thank you for asking it. Maybe Reda or Sasank, you would like to take that?
Thank you. That's a great question. I'm happy to hear that there's interest. So we have two processes for cities to join, and they can apply directly as long as they have the authority. I mean, every country is different, and there might be some restrictions placed on some countries, but cities can apply directly. Maybe that's the most important thing. We have two processes. So one is if you're already being supported by one of our implementing entities, so ADB, AFD, GIZ, and a number of other implementing organizations. It's called a streamlined process. It's quite fairly easy to join, and we just ask our voting members of the steering committee to give a no objection. If you're not receiving any technical support, the process is also not super complicated, but it's a little bit more time consuming. And what we also try to do during the process of accepting a member is to then do exactly what you're asking for, is to see it's not just about signing a declaration. And that is important. I think maybe there's two components to partnership. So one is the declaration that they sign, which we can also use for our advocacy in trying to get additional funding to do this type of work, in elevating the topic of decarbonizing urban transport, in ensuring that this topic has the visibility at the global level that it requires to access the funding. The second is then specifically, what does the city get? And so when cities apply for membership, we try to shop around the concept, and at the minimum, what we can do is always we will invite you to the trainings and ensure that you have full access to the methodology, answer any questions you have about using the methodology. And I think what I'm hearing from you, like if the city already has plans, we do trainings, we've done them in the past and we'll do them again, for example, of how to access applying for project preparation facility support, right? So then we do like courses with cities who are already a little bit more advanced. Matthias had mentioned C40 CFF, for example, but in the Asia region, there's of course CDIA, and there's lots of other project preparation facilities, and so that's something that we could do like very concretely. But yeah, so just reach out to me or Juliana, and we can walk you through a little bit more specifically the process of applying. It's not particularly complicated, I'm sure. You can manage quite easily with your cities. Yeah.
Thank you, Sasan. Reda, would you like to add anything?
Maybe just say that I think in Latin America, we also already have examples of cities that were not member but were supported by ITDP. And ITDP is a knowledge partner of MYC, has been for a long time, and that applied and are now member of this initiative. So that would be another example.
Thank you. Maybe just adding what you said. So becoming a member is really something because there is a commitment and there is a declaration. And you can access all the services that MYC provides. And you've heard this morning that as part of the MOU, FD and ADB are also mobilizing resources to support this effort. So it's another level. So, and it's based on the interaction we have on the project with the cities and on the future engagement that we have with these cities. So I would say that for cities where there are planned projects with ADB and AFD, it will be easier to access those funds. Usually, and what we did in the past, and a few examples were given during the presentation, is that we can have up to $500,000 per city that can be used for a variety of activities, develop some SUM or complement the planning documentations or plans that are already existing. But Sasank also said that since 2021, we have this new service area that is supporting project development. So depending on how mature your city is vis-a-vis sustainable urban mobility planning, we could also use that MYC support to refine some project or bring some component that may have been neglected or you don't have the finance to develop. So just as we said that sustainable urban mobility planning is city specific, then the support that MYC will provide will also be city specific, try to best meet the needs. It's almost lunchtime, so it's another good news, but if you have more questions to our speakers, we can still take that question and observation on what has been said this morning. Yeah?
Hi. Just one question for Sir Lloyd. You mentioned about parking levy. Maybe you can talk about that more and how that will complement a bus project, just like what we have in the city, because we also have parking issues and private vehicles, and we would like citizens to embrace public transport. And you said that it can subsidize cost for the public transport. So maybe you can talk about that more. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you for the question. There's a certain justice in thinking about private motorized vehicles paying for the public transport system. And that's, you know, if you go back a few decades, that was sort of the idea behind congestion charging, which started in Singapore and was sort of got famous in London and so forth, but it was very complicated. So I think in Australia, they sort of developed parking levy to bring in similar amounts of money. And we're talking very serious amounts of money to pay for the public transport system, but in a way that would have a very low administrative cost. So again, a parking levy isn't like what you imagine a parking meter on the side of the street. It has nothing to do with that. It is effectively a land tax on all non-residential parking spaces. So what's a non-residential parking space? ADB, mega mall next door, you know, business centers, shopping malls, you know, you name it. There's a lot of that in the Philippines, particularly, but around the region. And, you know, there's a few million of those. And let's say every day you're bringing in 50 pesos for each parking space. Now, what's nice about the administrative cost of that is about 1%. It's very, very low. It's something you can administer that effectively. We do use the word levy. It's not a tax because in many cases, you have to basically to introduce a new tax is politically very difficult, but a levy is relatively painless. And I also think the cities that have been successful, maybe I'll just point to another one that's done a parking levy is Nottingham in the UK, is that all the cities that have done it successfully from a marketing standpoint, they tied it to the public getting something and to the business community. So there, they tied it to the new tram system, and they put up billboards, and they said, this new parking levy is going to pay for the tram system, or in your case, the new Davao, e-bus system is being paid for by this, and that makes it much more socially acceptable. In much of our cities, though, in the region, here in the Philippines, have only about anywhere between 17 and 20% of the mode share is private vehicle. So it's actually a minority, a wealthy minority, but that's actually adds up to a lot of cars. They all have to park. So it's serious revenues. And I've said we have examples of cities using a parking levy where they not only got rid of any subsidy, they realized we don't even need fares anymore. That it actually bringing in those fares was more of a headache and a cost than it was worth it. And particularly in our region, as you know, in many of your cities, public transport fares, bus fares have to be very low to be acceptable. But then it's not really helping you that much. Now, I'll just end by saying parking levy is one of our best non-fare revenue sources in making it, but I should say there are others. There's, we get Imran over there to talk about what they did in advertising in Peshawar. And if you take a laissez-faire to advertising, it brings in, so much money. They were aggressive. They got money from advertising that you wouldn't imagine because they really went for it. There's probably in your public transport system also places you can put commercial kiosks and sort of get retail revenues. Those are sort of aggressive strategies that you need to be actively going after. And I guarantee if you can go after advertising, after retail, parking levy, you really can balance your books. It's an extremely lucrative way. And we need to get out of this mentality that public transport needs to be subsidized. If we're aggressive about this and we market it to the public in the right way, we can pull this off. Sorry for being long, Bertrand.
It's never long enough. So, and it's extremely important what you said. It's a great question. Thank you for asking. And it's true that it may sound a bit controversial, but being aggressive on those aspects is important. And it will be part of the discussion of, I think, our last session today on financing public transport. So we'll go a bit beyond that, but that's a perfect summary or teaser for that. Thank you, Lloyd. I think it's almost lunchtime, but if there is one more question, we can take it. We can also discuss during lunch, and we'll continue the discussion this afternoon. I think lunch is calling us. Lunch is served, I think it's in the hallway. And yeah, I would let Diane explain to us how it works. So thank you to our speakers. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. So for today, our lunch is available at the hallway outside, but we can eat here at the same table that we have. Otherwise, you can also occupy the cocktail tables outside or, sit around the area. That will be okay. Thank you. Enjoy your lunch. And we will be back by
1:30.
1:30 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you. And round of applause to our speakers again.